effectively, as your fire journey continues, you replace time with things you don't like with things you do like, but you still feel busy. And that's really the trick, is you think, oh, you're just going to be bored and you're going to have all this time. It's not, because you filled the time. You're always going to fill the time, but you're now filling it with things that you love rather than things that you hate. And ultimately, that's what this stuff is all about, you know?
You don't have to wait until you reach financial independence to start enjoying your life. You can do that much earlier and start living a life that you love and that's true to you. Welcome to Freedom Before Fire. Using fire and life design techniques, we help you create freedom on your way to fire instead of waiting until you're retired to do the things that light you up. I'm your host, Greg, a fire movement and life design enthusiast. If you're itching to get freedom now, then let's do this. Michael, thank you very much for joining the show. I really appreciate you dropping by. So, Michael, for people that don't know much about yourself, do you mind giving the guys a quick 60-second intro?
Yeah, certainly. So, yeah, my name is Michael Houghton. I'm originally from New Zealand. I moved to Ireland way back in 2011. I met an Irish girl while I was traveling through the year before. We have 3 kids today. We live in Limerick in Ireland. I guess we've been through the worst in Irish kind of financial history in terms of the great financial crash to now in boom times. And I guess we've capitalized from that largely within our own financial journey. We started FIRE in 2018. I guess we were a typical Irish middle-class family stuck in the rat race, living paycheck to paycheck. I am the token software developer in terms of the FIRE movement, so I have that kind of tech background. And yeah, I guess we pursued FIRE 2018, and 2024 we kind of hit our FI number. So we're progressing to semi-retirement is probably the best way to describe it. But yeah.
Awesome. And yeah, you mentioned before we jump into numbers and things like that, you mentioned living in Limerick, and I've never been there before. So for people that hasn't been there, what's it like living there? What drew you to it and things like that?
Yeah, well, obviously my wife was from here, so that was a massive, massive draw, and I was going to live anywhere she was. That's how how it was with her. But
Nice.
it's an amazing city actually. It's not too big, it's not too small. It's about 90,000 people. It has everything that you want on your doorstep. There's not too much traffic, and it's quite a good place to live. Where it's in Ireland, it's kind of 2 hours to everywhere, so it's quite good from that point of view. It's got all the pharmaceutical companies, which is quite interesting. You see, obviously, a lot of the pharmaceutical talk at the moment with the US and tariffs and so on. But a lot of those companies are based here. A lot of people have been moving here more recently. It's had a little bit of a housing boom because of kind of the jobs that are here and the opportunities. So it's been an interesting place to position myself as a place. When I moved here in 2011, I had 25% unemployment, had a lot not going for it, to a place that I guess we've kind of been opportunist in a way to have got in here, bought property when it was cheaper, and now we're starting to see the repercussions of that, and as it progresses.
Nice. And what kind of things do you like to do in Limerick, like you and your family on the weekends and evenings and things like that?
Yeah, it's an interesting place. I'm a golfer myself, so I enjoy playing golf.
Mm-hmm.
I try and play 3 times a week. There's a local course only a few minutes away, which is quite great. So we spend a lot of time on the golf course, going for walks. Into sport, obviously, Limerick's a huge sporting city. Lots of sport available here. My guys are field hockey players. That's been my background. I've helped set up clubs here and been involved in various committees and boards and hockey here. So a lot of it is sport. This time of year being summer, it's a quieter time for us. I guess some of the interesting FIRE things is that we enjoy a low-cost, simple lifestyle. So for us, it's spending time together, going for walks, doing things, playing video games together, those sort of things. So we enjoy a kind of relaxed lifestyle as much as anything. If we're going to do a fun day out, it'd probably be the movies. Movies are quite cost-effective here. You can get a ticket to the movies for about €6. So it's quite cheap for us to go to the movies. But yeah, look, life is busy. You've got 3 kids. You're just trying to get through a lot of the days, just trying to survive and getting through. But we make time for each other each day, and that's probably our most important thing as a family.
Nice. And then how about yourself? What's like Michael when when you're not writing and you don't have the microphone on you? What does Michael like enjoy doing? What's
Yeah,
Michael's thing?
yeah. I mean, I guess it's certainly. I mean, golf is a massive part of my life, and I have great friends that play, and I get to enjoy that and try and get better at a game that's just really really hard. So that's a lot of my time spent on that. And look, between that, I mean, again, life goes gym. We joined the gym with my wife, and that's been a great thing. And fitness is, and this is probably typical of the kind of the FI journey. You grind for so long, and you neglect your body, and then suddenly you have more time freedom, and you go and join the gym and get to more fitness and things like that. So that's obviously a massive part of it as well. Um, yeah, obviously just working and enjoying as well, finding that work life balance, taking life at our own pace, having time freedom. So it's interesting when you look at your day to day, you're ultimately trying not to have too much in a day and take life at a steady pace. Spend time with my wife during the day, long lunches, all those sort of wonderful things. It's going to sound cheesy, but I enjoy. We have a new local supermarket here. I enjoy going and getting fresh groceries every second day and taking my time at the supermarket. So again, not a hugely exciting life in terms of I'm not jet setting around the world or anything, but a nice, simple, relaxed life is ultimately what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and it's one that obviously everyone enjoys at their own things, and things don't have to be, super crazy or extravagant. And it is usually the simple things anyway that people
Exactly. Yeah, that's
that brings the
exactly what
most joy, isn't it?
exactly. In a life of a stress-free as possible life is a great life. A life with no financial stress or little financial stress. I had a friend of mine who's just had a boiler go in his house. He had to replace it, and he had no money for it. It's been such a stress on his life. So I actually ended up loaning him the money to help get the job done. And he's extremely grateful. I had a message from his mother yesterday just to say thank you for helping him out because he was obviously in a pickle. But that's the sort of thing that fire allows you to. Those sort of things come up and you just roll with the punches with it, and the stress is gone from it. So it's an interesting thing. But yeah, life is very much. I mean, obviously we enjoy travel, and we still travel. We still go on low cost holidays where we can visit family and so on.
Hmm.
But life is very much just about taking it at your own pace and enjoying it, which I think is really a lot of the benefits that FI gives.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so so just to jump over to sort of like the numbers and get that bit out of the way, just to understand, what your current investments, your current portfolio. I know you post it, and I've seen your articles about your regular updates. But for people that are not aware, can you just give them an idea of how your portfolio is set up at the moment and your sort of fire number targets?
Yeah, yeah. So I get a lot of criticism that my portfolio is a little bit complex, but I guess to give some background, Ireland is an interesting country. It's a country where the state will look after you pretty much all the time. It's a very much a socialist country, but obviously it's a high tax country as well. So it can be challenging to structure your investments in such a way that are somewhat tax efficient. So initially, when I started, I was 33 at the time. We have a very good pension system here. I know pensions are somewhat boring, but they're obviously a great tool that we have at our disposal when it comes to financial independence. So my initial aim was just to throw everything into this pension. And by the time I turned 50, I was going to be able to access that pension and start withdrawing 4% a year. So that was my big goal. Based on my income at the time, it was realistic that it was going to take me 17 years. As my journey continued and I got better, I focused on income. Income was a massive side for me. I realized pretty quickly early on that income was the big lever that I could pull to try and get there faster. I got better projects, better jobs as a contractor. I started working more as well, grinding more as well to get there, which I guess is an interesting aspect as well, and was a decision that wasn't easy to make. But for a couple of years, I was grinding as much as I could. As we got closer, I realized that I was going to need some investments outside of that pension because it looked like I was going to hit FI before 50. So we ended up starting to buy property, and we bought property within my company. We also did a deal where the house that we lived in, we bought a new house and we rented the old house out. So we did those sort of equity swaps and things. But effectively, we have a portfolio today, which is about 25% index funds and a pension and 75% property, which is four investment properties, one of which is mortgage free. And the other three are fairly small mortgages, manageable mortgages. So, yeah, rental income is a huge part of I guess our system. We have a portfolio value of around €775,000. about €30,000 a year in rental income. And the rest I offset with a little bit well, I'm transitioning into semi-retirement. It's the easiest way. I mean, our portfolio as a number, and I get a heap of criticism. I write for the Irish Independent these days. I get a heap of criticism that fire number is too low. There's no way you can retire on that number. And that's why I'm keen to talk about, freedom before FI, because there's a definite argument to say that our number's too low, and that we haven't baked in every expense. And I totally take that on board, and that's totally okay. But I don't want to do any more grinding. I'm sick of grinding. I'm happy to let the portfolio compound as much as it can. I'm happy to take the criticism that, we're not really FI. And if that's the case, so be it. Because I also understand that work is an important part of being FI, and we're going to work anyway. We're just going to get to work on our own terms. And at the moment, I'm negotiating to move away from my 9 to 5. I'm hoping to go back to just do freelancing, casual based work, work around my own schedule. So I know that that's ultimately where I'm going to end up. And that's going to be a great balance in terms of, being able to enjoy the portfolio, withdraw a little bit off the portfolio, but also know that I'm going to have some working income as well.
Nice. Yeah. Awesome. So roughly around 700 plus overall, as you said, 25% in sort of stocks, and then sort of the rest in property. And
Yes.
yeah, let's try to squash that argument. People that's coming to you and you're hearing comments, people saying, "Oh, it's too low." So your annual goal, so the annual sort of passive income, did you say as a family it's like 40K? Did I get that right?
Exactly. We get a little bit of, I know it sounds strange, right? But we get a little bit of money here from the state for our kids. So this is quite a generous child allowance. So by the time that you've factored in some of those expenses, it does cover a fairly decent chunk of your kids' expenses. We can pretty much live off around, if we had to draw down 40,000 a year from the portfolio, we would live a fairly comfortable life. Now, it's not going to be a life of big holidays and new cars and big house renovations, but it would be a standard enough lifestyle here in Ireland. There would be lots of families here in Ireland living off that sort of income. So the way we kind of see it is we could retire today and do that if we wanted to, and that would be okay. But as it is, I know work is somewhat accidental anyway. You're going to naturally bring some money in whether you want to or not. And I guess I had an opportunity recently to work for the Irish Independent, which was a paid job to write articles about fire. So I would do that for free. That's a great example of accidental income. But even within work, I have clients and friends of mine that I've been working with for 20 years that come to me, hey, I need help with this, I need help with that. So naturally, there's going to be an accidental income aspect of it anyway. So assuming that I earn 10,000 a year just doing that, plus 30,000 a year in passive income, then that makes up the 40,000 a year that that the family needs to get through each year.
And that's really good, especially as you said, family of three. Are expenses slightly lower in your area in any way, or you're just quite really good with being frugal?
Yeah.
And
I mean, Ireland has a massive amount of criticism for being an expensive country, and it can be. We were fortunate enough to buy housing when it was cheap. Obviously there'd been a massive financial crash here. House prices dropped 50%. So we picked up a house in 2013 for about €100,000, which was ludicrously cheap compared to what this would be today.
Wow.
Yeah. And again, but even the houses that we bought more recently as part of our property portfolio, we were paying around €150,000 at the time for them. So in my mind, that was quite cheap property, and was a reason why I kind of diversified to property, because I saw a massive opportunity to buy what I considered to be fairly cheap houses. I guess to put that in perspective, my parents were living in New Zealand at the time. So I'd call them up and I'd say, hey, I've just bought a house here in Ireland and I bought it for €150,000. And they'd say, no. We want to know what you purchase it for, not what your deposit was for the property, right? Just to put it in perspective, they couldn't believe it was possible to buy a 3-bedroom house for that much money. So we kind of diversified that way and did all of that. And again, so we had the low-cost housing, and that's been a significant aspect. There's this saying in the FIRE movement, the fat expenses, food, accommodation, and transport. If you can keep those costs relatively low, then life becomes a lot easier. There's a lot less stress in your life. It really just comes down to what you're spending optionally. So I've managed to keep that low. We shop at the German supermarkets, so we keep our costs low with food. We don't eat out a huge amount. We don't do a huge amount of takeaways, so we, again, keep those costs low. And then transport, we drive an old car that we paid for in cash. That's a diesel car, so it's relatively cheap to run. petrol prices are ridiculously expensive here. I can only imagine how much cheaper they are in the Philippines. But
Yeah.
again, Limerick's a small city. You're not usually traveling too far. And if you're keeping your costs low and trying to be as fuel efficient as possible, then life helps, And I guess that's a lot of it. It's about structuring the system in such a way that you control the controllables where you can. And then, you get to the other stuff that you love, you get to spend on the gym memberships, the golf memberships. It gives that money to spend on that, still within that kind of compressed lifestyle of 40,000 a year.
Amazing. Yeah, it sounds like you got a really nice balance of, keeping costs low, but also doing things you enjoy. So yeah, well done.
Yeah, and you know what? It's tricky. Like obviously, like budgeting isn't sexy, right? Budgeting isn't sexy, and tracking expenses isn't sexy. And we still do that today. We've been tracking expenses for 7 years. My wife finds it really difficult. She hates the constraints of a budget, but it's a reality of fire, and it's something which I didn't kind of realize until I got closer to the number that you're grinding away for years, and you think, gosh, I can't wait to hit this number and have full financial freedom. But the reality is, it's not financial freedom that you get; it's financial independence, which is a very different thing. It allows you to live a comfortable, stress-free life within a constraint of a budget, but it doesn't allow us just to go and take holidays and buy new cars and do all these fancy things, which is, I guess, one of the things that I think was difficult to kind of comprehend with. And it's where people say, oh, I hit that number and I don't feel any different. And I think it's because of that constraint, which is why, you realize that you now have a life where all of your basics are covered. But if you want to take that trip to New Zealand or that new car or those sort of things, you still have to work for that. So it's been a challenge coming to grips with that. The initial excitement of we've hit this number has been a reality of, okay, what next? And how do we move on from that? And whilst it's been great to not have to contribute to the portfolio anymore, and we're going to start taking withdrawals from next month, we've been kind of just building a little bit of a cash cushion before we start withdrawing from the portfolio. It's been an interesting aspect to realize that this whole kind of early retirement thing is a little bit of a myth. It's semi-retirement, and semi-retirement is wonderful, and I think is a great balance. But it's certainly not lying on a beach in the Philippines somewhere. I'm sure you can attest to that anyway. It's different from what we think it's going to be when we're grinding away and, slogging it out with our bosses and so on.
Yeah, that's it. Just going back to the portfolio really quickly. So obviously you do, most of yours is in property as opposed to sort of index funds. And I know in the community there's mostly, I suppose, is in sort of index and stocks. What's the differences in terms of sort of day to day and running them, and what's the difference between having a portfolio mostly property as opposed to sort of index funds? What are the sort of pros and cons, I suppose?
Yeah, great question.
For anyone starting out.
Yeah, I don't know if I would do the same portfolio today, if I was starting today, if I'm honest. Index funds have the massive advantage of being passive, truly passive. You literally set and forget. And in a way, property has been great for us in terms of it's allowed us to jump earlier than we would have in index funds. Realistically, at a 40,000 euro withdrawal rate, I would have needed €1 million in pension in index funds to be able to jump. So because we had fairly good yields on a rental income, that cash flow has been able to come in to allow us to jump sooner. So it's certainly been a little bit of a fire shortcut, if you like. But it comes at a cost, and that cost is the fact that stuff happens. You need to be on call. Issues happen. I've had a tenant move out at the moment, and I've gone to look at that property. They've been in there just a year, and I went, oh, this is tired. This house is tired. It needs paint. It needs new carpet. It needs new shower door. It needs an electrician to fix a few things. It's got a whole list of things that need to be done. And I've got about 2 or 3 weeks until the new tenant moves in. So it's going to be a fairly busy time. And this is time when I am not working. I've got 5 weeks off now. I go back for a week or two and have another few more weeks off. I've negotiated time off over the summer with my main contract, and I'm going to be spending it painting and doing all sorts of horrible things. So there's definitely that aspect of it. You need to be prepared for that. Now, for me, the benefit of the returns that we've had in property definitely outweigh the hassle. But we've been exceptionally lucky that Irish property is in a boom time at the moment. We've had a 12% rise in Irish property prices in the last 12 months. And when you compare that with the leverage aspect that you get, leverage being the mortgage, the fact that you might only buy a property for, say, 60,000 euros up front, when you compare that and you look at the numbers on paper, we've definitely done well in our portfolio. And it's sometimes almost embarrassing when you look at the numbers, when you revalue those properties quite conservatively every 6 months. They consistently jump up, and you might be jumping up 5,000, 10,000 euros every time in the valuation. And when you've got 4 properties, that's a 40,000 euro jump in the portfolio. So it has allowed us, on at least on paper, to build a portfolio quite quickly. But it's obviously come up this trade-off of it's not passive. It's definitely not passive, and tenants are difficult. Government legislation is always changing. The rules are always changing. You've got obviously tax to pay. Within a pension, you don't have that tax to pay. It's tax-free. So there's all these additional complications. Now, for us, a big driver was the fact that we do have young kids, and we wanted to have a bit of a hedge for them. And I know it's silly. Some financial advisors tell me that I'm being ridiculous even worrying about this. Being from New Zealand, I've seen the effects of property prices driving people out of the market. New Zealand property prices over the last 20 years have been astronomically higher than they were 20 years ago. And in a way, I felt the same about the Irish property market. I just felt like, if it continues going as it is over the next 10, 20 years, then it is going to be a case where it's going to be almost impossible to buy a house. It's getting more and more difficult even today. So it's nice to know that we have a place for our kids to live if they want to one day, or you sell one of those properties and
one
put it
one house each, isn't it?
Yeah, effectively, yeah, that was a big part of it. And again, it's a silly thing to kind of worry about, but like Irish life now, like the rental market here, and there's a global housing crisis, but if you look at the Irish housing crisis particularly, it's particularly bad that there isn't really a private rental sector anymore. Once you hit 20 as a child, you go to college. Once you come out of college and you start working, you no longer go and rent like you used to. Then the pathway forward now is you stay and live at home for as long as possible. You save for a house deposit and hope that you can eventually buy a house. So that could mean another 10 years. You could be 30, 35 by the time you're actually leaving home. And it's actually a reality of Irish lifestyle now. For many parents, they're going to be having their kids up until their mid-30s in their house. At least we have a bit of leverage that we could put a child or two into a rental property. And so we kind of see it as a little bit of a hedge. And that's a big reason why we went down that route. I don't think we would have gone down that route as aggressively had we not factored that in for our children,
Nice. Amazing. So we're going to get into sort of lifestyle design in a minute, but I just wanted to go back to how you kind of got to, being FI. And I know you touched on it briefly earlier, but I suppose I just want to just reiterate, 7 years it took you from roughly 2018, isn't it?
Yeah,
2018
correct.
to, get into pretty much fine. I just want to say that's amazing. And I suppose it's also just good to anyone sort of listening that, there's a lot of things that you've done across that 7 years. And it's really been quite an interesting ride, isn't it? Because you've done things from working part-time to working 2 jobs. But first of all, how did you get into FI like in 2018? What was that? Was it something you read? Was it something you saw? A friend talked to you about it? Like, how did you get to it? And I'm assuming I know it's 2 questions here, but did you start from pretty much zero in 2018?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we definitely started from zero. We obviously had the additional benefit of buying that first house at a low price. So that was our kind of foundation, and we didn't have any debt. So we effectively came from zero. I'd say 2018, we let's say we had €100,000 worth of equity in the property at the time, with no debt. That's really where we looked at. I was working hard, and at the time I was a freelance developer. I was a software developer working by the hour. Had my own business, nice small business, maybe 10 clients that I would do ad hoc work for. And I worked hard, and I didn't enjoy the work. I didn't enjoy the work because I felt like I was never getting ahead. And so every year you'd sit down, and Christmas is always a time to reflect, and you'd have your great Christmas break. You're burnt out from work, and it was January, and it's so dark in Ireland and cold, and you're down. I had a little home office up the back that I'd have a little electric heater next to me with a beanie on and a jacket on and a blanket over the legs, and you'd be sitting there in the freezing cold going, wow, I've got another year of this, another year of, and what have we got to show for it? And we built a lifestyle in such a way that we spent everything we earned. And I actually look back, and I've done it recently where I've looked back through all my pay slips from about 2011 to 2018. And every year I was getting a pay rise, but every year we were just spending it. Now, obviously, in that time, we went from 0 kids to 3. We got married. We did all sorts of huge life. We were traveling every year. So we did all these great lifestyle things. but we had nothing fundamentally to show for it. And I was frustrated by the fact that I felt like, how many more years of this do I have to do? I haven't even started thinking about retirement, let alone early retirement. So it was very much this kind of, right, what do I do? So I turned to the internet, as everybody does, and I started researching. And I remember like even investing was new to me. I was like, okay, so I'm going to need my money to work for me. So this was kind of this concept. And obviously you discover people that are in a similar situation that have mentors and so on. And that's where you start discovering the podcast, discovering the blogs, Mr. Money Mustache, all those sort of people. And you discover this, I guess, new way of living. But just because you discover it and you start taking these things on board doesn't mean that your family's going to get on board with it. So that's obviously a massive challenge in itself. But I was somewhat fortunate that come 2018, I just switched. I just found a new project. It had come with about a 20% pay increase. And it was really quite a subtle kind of first conversation with my wife to say, look, every year we've got a pay increase. We've spent it. How about this year we just keep our lifestyle the same and we start saving and investing this money instead? So that's what I guess started as a catalyst. Now, unfortunately, I was naive to investing and we didn't have all these great resources that we have today of where you put your money. So I pretty much made every investing mistake that I could. I felt like I was behind. I felt like I needed to chase high risk, high returns. I got into all the wrong things, every crypto scam you could imagine, Forex trading scam. I got caught in a forestry scam here in Ireland, all these disastrous things. In fact, I think the first year I saved around 40,000 euros, and I would say most of that was actually lost to investment scams. So it was one of those things where I learned the hard way. But yeah, again, for anybody that's starting today, just save your money first. Don't feel like you've got to get it working for you straight away. Be okay with just building up an emergency fund, have a 6-month supply, and then start worrying about where the money goes. And whatever you do, just put it in index funds. If you want to buy some property, fine, but keep it regulated as you can, because I learned the hard way. So very much went through that way. Come 2019, I had started to realize that, okay, this FIRE stuff is great, but there's all these other great benefits that it gives you, because one of the things that's often not talked about with the FIRE community is financial independence is the ultimate goal. But actually, you gain all these great benefits pretty much straight away. Once you've suddenly got a little bit of money saved up, you're no longer living paycheck to paycheck. Then all of a sudden, you feel less stress. Immediately, your financial stress is gone. I started building up in 2019. I started building up a little bit of cash flow for the first time. I had learned from some of these investment mistakes. And I realized, well, hang on. If I worked half as much as I do, I can still cover my lifestyle and I can suddenly have all this time. So I made the decision to go part-time. My youngest was 2. I wanted to experience what this potential FIRE lifestyle was going to be like. And that was a great year. I remember going down for naps with him during the day, taking him for long walks during the day. Even today, like, you see the benefit from that today as a parent, because we're still so close today. It's not just mummy. It's mummy and daddy with him. And it's because of that time that I gave him that I got to do so much great stuff. Interestingly, when you're only working, I think I was working 20 hours a week at the time, you suddenly have all this energy to do other things. So I started launching new hockey clubs. I think I launched 3-4 new hockey clubs within that year. Started the podcast, started a tree planting organization that's a volunteer project. So started doing all these other things outside of the conventional work, because work wasn't very fulfilling for me. So I found all this fulfillment in all these other things that was helping the community. So that was obviously great. And 2019 was a great year for that. 2020 came along. Obviously, look, it's all talked about in every podcast. COVID came and kind of changed everything. And we decided that we wanted to move house. House prices in Ireland initially dropped. And I suddenly realized the only way that we were going to be able to move house was to earn more money. So I went back to working more full time. At the time, initially in March, I actually thought I was going to be out of work initially. But of course, a lot of my clients were online stores and so on. So suddenly they needed me. Completely the other way around. So all of a sudden I had so much work and they were desperate to, their orders were up 10 times more than they were. So they needed software solutions. They needed to pay whatever sort of money that they could get it on. I was working hugely and suddenly the money was coming in. Come 2021 then, all of a sudden, companies that I traditionally wouldn't have been able to work for, that I would have had to go into the office for, were offering remote contracting roles. So these contracting roles started to come along, and all of a sudden, instead of working for the hour and being paid by the hour, I was getting paid by the day. And this was a game changer, because when you're paid by the hour, every hour counts. When you're paid by the day, well, you can sit in a meeting, you can take a slightly longer lunch break than normal, you can kind of manage your energy throughout the day as you need to. And I'd always been really good at deep focus work. So, and this is natural. It's most of us would work this way. Most of us don't start at 9 o'clock and work the same level until 5 o'clock. I realized that I could start at 9 o'clock and do 2 or 3 hours of really deep focus work. And that would pretty much be my day. And I could kind of do the meetings in the afternoon and prepare for the next day again. But I could very much get through what I needed to do, and that would be my day. And so quickly, I realized towards the end of 2021, if I'm working in this deep focused way, and I'm using most of my energy in the morning, what if I just were to do that again in the evening time? So I picked up a second contract, a US contract in the evening. Now, just to put some numbers on this, IT rates at that time were ludicrous. The whole world had gone crazy in the tech industry, and software developers were in huge demand. So I wouldn't do this today because the rates aren't there today. But I could bank €1,000 plus a day doing this with the two contracts. And they're the sort of numbers that were so ludicrous that people say, "Oh, how could you do that?" It's like, well, it's quite easy to get out of bed when you're earning that sort of money a day, And that was kind of the reality. And so I did that, and I got burnt out from it. It was hard. The kids had got to an age, and it's funny when I talk to my wife about this, because I sometimes talk back, how was that for you? Because we obviously agreed as a family to do this. And she always says, to be honest, I didn't really notice. The kids were at an age where they were going down themselves. My wife's an early bird. She goes down early in the evenings anyway. So by 8 o'clock, our house at the time was largely quiet. And I'm a bit of a night owl anyway. So by 9 to 11, I could do my deep focus work, complete my US contract during that time. And that would allow us to kind of do this lifestyle where, as a family, it wasn't too noticeable. But from a financial point of view, it was obviously made a massive, massive difference. Obviously, my burnout was another thing, and managing that was another entire challenge that I had. But from a financial point of view, it made a massive difference. And when you look back, I think in an 18-month period, we bought 3 of those investment properties. And it was largely that working the extra, because, obviously your expenses are the same. If you add the extra job on, you're actually 3 timesing how much you save. Assuming that we were saving 50% beforehand, suddenly we were saving 75%. And that's really what allowed us to retire or to hit financial independence early, and I guess allow us to retire if we wanted to today. Looking back, we're now seeing the compounding impact of that. And so as exhausting as it was, when you see the growth in the property valuations, the rental income still coming in, that's when we're thankful for that. And in that way, I don't regret it, because, again, it was an opportunity of a lifetime in terms of the rates and the opportunities that were there at the time.
Yeah, that's amazing. Over that, like, 7 years is quite short, and it's interesting how these things that come up, like obviously like things that look on the outside like it's bit of a pitfall, like COVID and things like that, but it turned out to be something amazing and really helped you guys. And so there was parts of your journey where things got accelerated. Yes, I like that. So you kind of had bits of both, of like reduced time, loads of working loads, and yeah.
Yeah, and do you know what? I remember there was one update I had. It was around towards the end of 2021. I was like, "Oh, I'm done. I'm going to hit slow. I'm just going to adopt slow fire. I'm just going to reduce my workload." And I put this blog post out, and I was, really excited to go down. And then, like, the next day I released it, I get an opportunity on LinkedIn, and I was like, "How much is that paying per day?" And it's like, so I was like ready to pack it in, and I was like, "You're actually offering me twice what you normally offer me for this sort of role." And so I took the opportunity. I was like, how could I not? And then all of a sudden, the next month, I've got to write back then. So it turns out I'm no longer doing this. I actually took another opportunity. But that's life, Opportunities come up, and you've got to take those opportunities when they come up, or you at least make a decision. More recently, I've had those opportunities come through again. So I had an opportunity to work for, I got headhunted by one of the bigger tech companies, and I turned them down. So that was for me quite exciting to go, right, I've actually decided not to do this now, because we're in a financial position where we don't need this work. I don't need this stress. But again, that's life. You take opportunities as they come, you roll with the punches. As you said, COVID was obviously terrible in a way. And obviously, for anybody that lost loved ones and so on, terrible. But it had a silver lining of this remote working culture that I was able to, I guess, take opportunities in.
Nice. And then just in terms of currently, how many hours are you working and what are you working at the moment?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm still contracting. I'm still contracting. I now work a government contract, which is extremely interesting. Very different from the private sector. I did in 2022. I was actually contracting for Apple, so I got to go and work for one of the biggest companies in the world and see that kind of how that was, and that was really really interesting. And once that contract ended, they offered me an opportunity to. I actually said to the recruiter at the time, I said I'd like something a little bit the slower pace. And they said, well, actually, we have a government role for you. So I now look after one of the main government websites here. And it's really, I love the team. I love the people. I love the slower pace of work. The money's still excellent, which is somewhat ironic. But again, I'm now finding the 9 to 5 thing difficult. I guess I'm working seasonally is probably the best way to describe it. I'm working 175 days this year. Last year I worked 230 odd. So it's definitely a reduction. I'm taking most of the summer off, which I'm hugely excited to, although it's raining at the moment. So I don't know how much summer we'll get here, but I'm hugely excited. I'm so excited for that. But at the same time, I'm hoping to scale back. I'm hoping by the end of the year to scale back further, whether that means working part-time or going back to freelancing. I'm feeling, I've got this guilt. I don't know if you've experienced this guilt before. It's like you've hit an FI number and you're still working and nothing's fundamentally changed. And we have things that we want to pay for. We've got this trip to New Zealand that we need to pay for. We had a little bit of home renovation work that we had to do that we've put off. So, you've kind of been saving so aggressively for so long that now all of a sudden that's gone. And it's like, right, well, now what? And so very much we've had to, I guess, get a couple of nice things out of the way. And now we're looking forward to really scaling back more and I guess really embracing that true semi-retirement. I'm trying to work more around my own hours. I don't like the constraints of 9 to 5. I prefer this. Sometimes I like getting up early and working, sometimes late. I want to be able to put lifestyle first and then put work second. Whereas at the moment, I'm not quite feeling that. And I have this, as alluded to, this guilt of, I'm not working as hard as I probably should be. And so I'm letting the team down sometimes. And I want to be able to be more flexible at work. And I have flexibility at work. And they say that you have flexibility. But then if you go to the gym during the day and you come back and you've been away from your desk for an hour or two, you come back and suddenly it's like the whole internet's blowing up. There's been problems while you're out. So you have this guilt of, even though you've got flexibility, it's not real flexibility. So it's just trying to find a balance in this. And as people say to me, this is a good problem to have. And it probably is. But again, it's challenging that kind of this freedom aspect that the fire gives you. And in your own mind, you have freedom, but society isn't always allowing you to have that. And work will say, yes, you've got flexibility, you've got time, we can work around your schedule, but the reality is different, so it's trying to find that balance.
That's it, balance. And balance is the key word. So obviously this podcast, the key theme is around, finding elements of freedom before reaching FI. There's this goal of reaching FI, but before getting there, there's all sorts of positives and freedoms and things that you could sort of unlock along the way. And so I think you mentioned a few things there, but I just wanted to ask, through your journey, your 7-year journey, obviously you mentioned a few things like working part-time, seasonal work, things like that. What freedoms has just being on the journey of FI unlocked for you on your journey?
Yeah, and I kind of touched on it a little bit at the start that fire as a thing to pursue gives you so much freedom very, very quickly. For me, once you kind of hit halfway, let's say you hit your FI number to halfway, the rest of the journey is downhill. And if you wanted to jump at that point, at least to go part-time, I totally would recommend that. I certainly found that I went myself from a situation where I was taking whatever contract would pay me the most to whatever contract was suited me best. That was kind of the transition for me. So the work changed in a sense of it went from chasing the highest paid work to finding work that I actually wanted to do, that I'd actually enjoy. And that was some of the freedom that it would give you. And if that's all it gave you, then that's, I think, a great thing. So many of us are working jobs just for the paycheck. I'm trying to work out now what life looks like for me in this kind of semi-retired status. I wanted the freedom to be able to go back to freelancing. And so that's why I kind of probably grinded another year or two longer than I could have. I think if I had, I think I also had the option, if I wanted to, at about 400,000 euros, 500,000 euros on the portfolio, I could have easily kicked it then and just gone coast fi. Because by that stage, you've been saving so much money that actually just covering your family's expenses is almost a trivial matter. Like working 40,000 a year is quite trivial compared to the 120,000 euros a year that I was putting into the portfolio at the time. So there's so much freedom that it gives you and so much flexibility. As it was, I saw myself, I guess I kind of did the one more year thing because I knew that it was going to put us in a much better position. But the freedom that you do achieve along the way, and as I kind of alluded to, I don't technically think if somebody were to sit down and crunch my numbers and look at the future expenses we have and so on, they would probably go, no, you're not really financially independent. So I think we're technically FI, but the reality is what we're living now is our freedom before fire lifestyle. But I'm also well aware that compounding is hugely underestimated. And I'll give you maybe an example. I interviewed an 84-year-old man recently, and he had the same portfolio value that I do. And he said to me, I just don't see how you can retire on that number at your age of 41. I'm 41 now. And I thought to myself, you really don't understand compounding at all. We, as humans, we're logical thinkers. We think in a linear fashion. We don't see this bell curve that is compounding. And, as it is, I'm living off the rental income of my investments, which means that my index funds are still going to grow. My property valuations are still going to grow, and my mortgages are still going to be paid off over time. So I know that I'm effectively withdrawing money, living a semi-retired life, and that portfolio is going to continue to grow as those valuations and as those stock valuations go up over time. And the numbers that are actually on those, when you actually, even one good year of 10% is going to make a massive difference long term than just a linear 4% that we often forecast when we put these things into a compounding interest calculator. So again, it's about understanding that, if you've got a massive portfolio at a young age, you've already made it. Whether you withdraw that or not, it's going to be so much bigger in 20 years time, 30 years time than we can possibly imagine and try to kind of calculate in our own mind.
Nice. I also like what you said about, other than sort of lifestyle, it sort of helps with your relationships as well. You mentioned earlier how having that extra time with your little ones earlier on, like you could see the relationship difference, in the future, and that's that's really powerful.
It's huge. It's hugely powerful. Look, obviously, I grew up with two working parents, and there wasn't a huge amount of time spent with my parents. It was a lot of time spent with my sisters and friends in the neighborhood, but the time spent with my parents, it wasn't always there because they were working hard, and that was the nature of the system. We've been very fortunate. My wife, when she had her first child, she stopped working, and because my career and my income progression improved, it got to a stage. She was a beauty therapist by trade. It got to a stage when the decision for her to go back to work came. It made more sense for me to work harder than for her to go back to work. She would have been on effectively a minimum wage job. And in my rates in IT, I was like, well, actually, for 1 hour of my time, I could actually pay for your whole day. So it made more sense for me to work a little bit harder than for her to go back to work. So she's been able to stay at home and is still a stay-at-home mother today. And that's been a wonderful thing that we've been able to give our kids because of that decision for me to maybe work a little bit harder here and there to offset that. And so again, it's about finding that balance and about maybe breaking free from some of the notions that you've got to have two parents at work, and we save so much on childcare. Here is quite expensive, so we save so much on childcare as a result of that decision.
Yeah, and just on that topic, I read you got your son a stock in Nintendo from his
Yes,
communal money.
communion money.
That's really,
Yes,
that's that's so cool. How did that happen, and how else do you sort of teach your little ones about
yeah.
sort of money
That's
and
a great.
finances?
It's a great question, and yeah. So I kind of mentioned earlier at the start of the year, I got an opportunity to write for the national paper here every second week, and that article was huge. It was by far my biggest article. We have a religious thing here, which is called a first Holy Communion, where effectively you go and you eat the bread for the first time. And as a result, you have a big party afterwards and you're given a whole lot of money, a ludicrous number of money for a 10-year-old. And my son ended up getting 700 euros that year. And most kids just go and blow it on things that they forget about years later. He did that. He spent a couple of €100 of it, but he ended up having 500 euros spare. And I managed to take the opportunity to, I guess, teach him about stocks. And he was hugely passionate about Nintendo at the time. He wanted to move. He wanted to move to Japan when he got older. He just loved everything Nintendo. And I happened to mention to him that you could actually buy a percentage of the company. And he was like, what? So, yeah, you can actually own Nintendo, a little bit of Nintendo, I said. And they'll also give you a percentage of the profit based on the percentage ownership you have. What? He's 14 today, and he still finds it hard to believe that he owns a piece of Nintendo and he's receiving those dividends, And it still
Nice.
doesn't, like, for a kid, it's like, how is this possible? How can I own these massive companies? Now, obviously, I didn't want to expose him to one stock. So I bought a little bit of Nintendo and put most of it in index funds
Yeah,
to allow him to. So obviously the gains that he's
nicely
been
done.
recording have been more about the index funds than the individual stock. But sometimes I'm asked what would have happened if that stock would have lost money. We obviously bought it in 2020, so it was a great time. I would have been just as happy if that had lost money as well, because that would have also been a lesson, that sometimes these things go down and you've just got to be patient and wait. But as it is, it's done very well. He then had a confirmation a few years later. So he did it again. He put more money in, and we just revalued. Every 6 months I revalue it. So his money is today worth €2,300. He put another 700 in his confirmation. So it's effectively almost doubled in 5 years, which is phenomenal,
There's no better
So
way to teach than them actually seeing the gains
yeah, exactly,
and getting the
No,
dividends, and they reinvested
yeah,
the dividends.
he did,
Does
of
he
course.
get
Yeah,
any?
of course. Now, I mean,
Yeah.
the interesting thing is he doesn't, because all my kids did it now. They've all followed suit. Even my
Nice.
8-year-old, he's up to €400 in his. So, and he hasn't had his communion yet. So that's quite exciting. He was getting a fiver a week from Granny, and he eventually realized that he could take his fiver a week, and after 20 weeks, he'd have 100. So after 20 weeks, he'd come to me and go, "Can I please invest this money in something?" So he was doing that, and Granny now
Sweet.
stopped giving him the fiver a week because she realized that he was investing the money. But so even his is up to €400, and he's quite excited by that. So it's been great. We lump it into our overall portfolio. So they're literally part of our portfolio, and I track it separately for them in Excel. It's nothing complicated. I haven't set up different broker accounts for them or anything. It's just very, very straightforward. That has been money added into the portfolio. To our FI number is literally a family affair, and at some stage they will likely withdraw that down, maybe when they go to college or whatnot. But it's been a great way to teach them about the power of compounding.
Amazing. All right, so Michael, I've actually got like loads of other questions and all the things that you've said across this, across this interview. There's a lot of things that have popped up in my head. I was like, oh, I really want to ask about this, but I know you're really busy, so I'm gonna try
No, you're
to
fine. You're
try
fine.
to wind down. And but before we go over to the sort of rapid fire questions, and I will give you this opportunity to put in any sort of plugs or any sort of calls to actions or anything like that. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we didn't touch on in terms of whether it's fire or anything else that you're doing?
Yeah, no, I think that maybe we could just briefly, maybe just to cover it off, because I've talked about the Irish Independent thing a couple of times. We could maybe just touch on that briefly, just
Absolutely.
to round up the interview in terms of I've mentioned it. But no, I mean, a lot of the stuff, I wanted to talk about was, the early retirement myth, and the fact, and I think I've touched on that, ultimately we're all going to fire is really about leaving the 9 to 5. That's ultimately what we're looking to do. I love your story and the fact that you're geo arbitrage, and I think that's fantastic. And I often wonder about packing up and moving to the Canaries myself, and doing that. But it's fascinating. So yeah, no, I'm very, very happy, and you've done a great job. I hope I haven't talked too much, but look, you can edit this as you need. So feel free to keep firing away.
No worries. Yeah, I mean, just on that about the you writing for the Irish Independent. Just really quickly, how did you get into that, and how was the reception so far?
Yeah, it's been interesting. So every couple of years, a few years back, I had a journalist reach out to me because obviously I started a podcast, and they were curious. And every so often, you do find that the media try to bring fire to the mainstream, and it's a scary place to go because obviously it's littered with criticism. So a journalist had interviewed me the year before. They realized that I was getting closer and closer to this milestone. If you look back, there's various articles where I'd give my number, and every, big 200,000, 300,000, the number kept getting higher and higher. And eventually I got a call from one of these journalists that said, look, we're actually looking to do more kind of alternative money stuff next year, and we're looking to do this new money section for one of the national newspapers. Would you be interested in writing? And I said, sure. And they said, look, we'll actually do a first piece and we'll see how that piece goes. So I wrote the initial piece, which is basically how our family had built this portfolio, how we had moved away from the traditional consumerism style of lifestyle culture, and I guess an alternative lifestyle of actually saving and investing your money and not blowing it all on Costa coffee. And it was published the 2nd of January. It was the most read article in the Irish Independent for January. It was an absolute huge piece. And from that, the success of that, they came back to me and said, actually, we want you to write every second week. So I've been writing about fire, sometimes just about money in general. And it's been interesting. It's been great, obviously, for the podcast popularity and so on. But equally, if you type my name in Google now, there's some stuff that you just don't want to read. It's terrible. As my journalist said, she said, if you're going to go and lift up the rock, expect to see creepy crawlies underneath. So there's a heap of criticism, not so much personally, but just about what we've done. I mentioned earlier, they're not really financially independent. How can they be financially independent if he's got a golf membership and they're planning this trip to New Zealand later this year? Those numbers don't make sense. How could it be possible to save that much money so quickly? Again, not understanding, I talked about it earlier, not understanding the power of compounding, the fact that we're so linear in our thinking. So yeah, it's been challenging in a way. It's been sobering as well. You know, you put yourself out there and you don't always get positive reception back within my own podcast. And look, my podcast has been a success in Ireland in itself. It's the number one investing podcast in Ireland. It's done quite well for itself, but it's niched. And so you have a comfort in your own tribe. When you put it out to the mainstream, you're obviously got a lot of people in Ireland, in every country, that are living paycheck to paycheck, that are struggling just to pay the bills. And now you've got this guy telling you how you should be spending your money and how you can have this alternative. So I get it. It's tricky. I don't know how long I'll keep writing for. I might pack it up by the end of the year. I'll wait and see. I'll wait to see if they even want me to keep writing. But I'm happy to have that freedom to be able to write, what I like and on various topics. And writing is a great way to, I guess, reflect. And a lot of it's for my own self. It's not just about the reader. It's more about my own reflection of where I'm at in my lifestyle and how I'm trying to work this stuff out. Because as I alluded to earlier, you have this vision of, I always had this vision of flipping my boss the bird and shutting down the computer, throwing the computer against the wall and never working again. And the reality is so different. It's so different. And it's because it takes time. And, it's as the exact name of your podcast, the freedom you gain along the way is the key. It's the journey, not the destination, all these cliches. And the Irish Independent, writing for them, has just been another part of that journey. It's been another part. Now, it does pay some money. It doesn't pay anywhere near what tech pays. But it's still money that's coming in that we hadn't expected to come in. And I, believe it or not, I took the opportunity before we even discussed money. And so she just offered me some money, and I said, "That's fine." I wasn't even negotiating it, and I even said I don't even want to take it. And she said, "Look, company policies, we have to pay you." So it's been one of those things where it's been nice. And
then you're like, "Yeah, if you insist."
if you insist, But look, as it is, as I see it, we make decent charity contributions each year. It'll just go into charity, which is fine, and that's all part of the fun. So. Look, it's one of those things, but yeah, the freedom aspect is definitely an interesting thing. And as I said, you have this vision of what it's going to be, and you realize that as you get closer to the goal, that you're already gaining all the freedom that you need, whether you're FI or not. And it's natural. It's natural because you've got more FU money, you've got you've got less stress when it comes to financial decisions. You're no longer making decisions based on financial reasons. You're making them based on emotional reasons. And that's where the freedom comes from ultimately. And as I said, I'm battling with this fact that now I've hit FI and now I'm going, well, hang on, I should be feeling differently than how I'm feeling. But you suddenly realize that it's been a transitional change. I'm certainly so much more happier than I was in 2022 and a lot more happier than I was in 2017. And ultimately, that's what this stuff is all about,
That's it. And along the way, you've also built up things that you'd love to do when you do fully flip the switch over to FI. You've got your article writing, you've got the podcast, you've got I know you've got like community meetups, and you've got golf. So you've kind of built all these things along the way, and you're doing them along the way because you love doing them. And then so when you finish, you're not just going to fully retire and not do anything. You've already built all these things, and you could just continue doing them. So
And that's really really interesting. And we often think about this concept of time, like time freedom. Like time freedom is obviously a huge thing, but there's a bit of an illusion to time freedom because we fill our time with other stuff. And the best example I can give you, and you asked me earlier about what's my day to day, what do I enjoy doing? So I play golf 3 times a week, and I might practice a little bit in between that. It's a lot of time, 4 hour golf round, plus travel, plus everything else. Now, as it is, one of my sons will often come with me and help me caddy, just because it's a lot of stress on the wife to leave the kids at home. But in 2022, I was lucky to get 1 round of golf a weekend, maybe just sometimes once a month. So time is replaced. Effectively, as your fire journey continues, you replace time with things you don't like with things you do like, but you still feel busy. And that's really the trick, is you think, oh, you're just going to be bored and you're going to have all this time. It's not, because you filled the time. You're always going to fill the time, but you're now filling it with things that you love rather than things that you hate. And ultimately, that's what this stuff is all about,
nice. All right, Michael. So I'm going to go over to the quick fire round. I've got 5 questions. If you could just answer them really quickly, whatever comes to mind. So if that's okay, I'll start with the first one.
Let's go.
Yeah. Okay. So question number 1 is, what's something you wish you'd done 10 years ago?
I'm assuming everybody here says like invest in Bitcoin and invest. And look, that would have been great to have done. Looking back, I feel like my own journey was natural. Like I invested at 33. That was the right time. The thing I wish I'd done earlier was probably focus more on my fitness, focus more on my health. I definitely neglected that at times. Probably even as simple as things like being better at relationships. My relationship with my wife was great. It's been wonderful. But again, those sort of things that when you're hit FI, you suddenly really try and focus on, that maybe you neglected a little bit early on when you were living paycheck to paycheck and so on. So yeah, I guess a lot of those things that, once money is no longer such a problem, now you've got these other challenges in life, to focus on some of those earlier, to have been 5 kilos less heavy than I am now and so on, so that I'm not at the gym absolutely sweating buckets to try and get back into the shape I should have been in the first place.
Nice. Good one. All right. Question number 2. What are 1 or 2 daily habits that have helped you in your journey?
Making the bed when you get up, and trying to clean early. I know this sounds silly, but like, a clean house is a happy house and so on. So I love a day where I can get up and get a load of laundry on, get the dishwasher on, have the bed dressed, anything that kind of evolves around feeling like you're in a more comfortable environment. And then obviously being able to do some sort of exercise. I have a challenge now where I have to every day do some sort of exercise. Golf is a good reason. It's a good reason to get out because you get the exercise in. But if going to a gym, going for a run, whatever I could be doing, some sort of movement every day. And that's, to be honest, when I was chasing FI, that was probably more important because I was at a desk all the time. But I guess the time freedom gives you that ability to have that the daily exercise.
Good one. Okay, question number 3. What's your most important lesson in life, or one of the most important lessons that you've experienced?
Yeah. Do you know, it's been an interesting one, and probably an answer that you're probably not expecting. I live a long way from my parents. They're in New Zealand, and we don't get to spend that much time together. So, for me, time is so precious. One of the great things about financial independence is the fact that you get your time freedom. But I'm now faced with parents that are aging and parents that don't really know my kids because we just haven't spent a huge amount of time together. So for me, it's about capturing those precious moments. And when you have time together with family, sometimes it feels like a little bit of a slog, and sometimes it's hard because, our parents have a different mindset and a view of the world than we did. There was a different generation. So there's always this kind of conflict that happens with family. But I just think, remind yourself that time is precious and time with family is precious. So, sometimes you got to bite your tongue and explain to the other family member, remind them that time is precious. And I think that's been probably my biggest driver. And, I spent time with my family recently. They were just visiting, and it was harder than I thought. It was harder than I thought, and I had to remind myself that.
Yeah, a really good one. And then question number 4, what are 2 or 3 transformational books that you can recommend to the listeners?
I'm going to give one that everybody knows and one that nobody knows. So J.L. Collins' A Path to Wealth, I think that's, the godfather of financial independence, is a great one. It was one of the books that I read very, very early on. But another one, and I'll get you a link for it, is an Irish author, new Irish author, Shane O'Brien, Bucket List to Best Self. And it's only recently published, but it's all about how he uses a bucket list to build his perfect life. And financial independence is one of the bucket list items. And this isn't so much cliched around, go and travel here, go and travel there, but it's about kind of building lifestyle goals that aren't just money focused, and allowing yourself to have the I guess the guilt to, or the guilt free, a lack of guilt to pursue those sort of things. So I'd highly recommend that book. It's a relatively short read, but it's a great read, and it's very, very. I've been reading it recently to try and understand my next steps. I think it's been a great book to read.
Nice. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. That sounds great. All right, and then the last one. What are 1 or 2 small things listeners can do this week if they wanted to do or sort of get to where you are, get to at your stage? What 1 or 2 things they could literally do this week?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that we did, and the biggest thing that's probably underestimated, is, and I touched on this earlier, is compounding doesn't just apply to your investments. It applies to your expenses and your income as well. And when you look at our numbers in our journey, and you can follow our journey through on the podcast. I write an article every month for 5 years, so you can literally see how the portfolio changes. It seems crazy when you look back, and I often read back myself, and it seems crazy. But if you can understand and take the opportunity to realize that if you can increase your income year on year and reduce your expenses year on year and continue to invest that difference, that the reason financial independence is possible in a relatively short time frame is because you're compounding all 3 of those attributes. You're not just compounding the investments. So understand that if you can ask for that pay rise, or if you can reduce your expenses, find an expense that you're paying and reduce that somehow, even if it's just a small margin, that if you continually do that over time, it's ultimately going to create this massive snowball. And that's really been the big thing for us, is focusing on those 3 attributes and compounding them consistently.
Great, good stuff. All right, so that ends the quick fire round. I appreciate you answering and sharing your thoughts about on those questions. So thanks, Mike. All right, so thank you very much for joining the show. Before we wrap up, Michael, is there any sort of plugs you'd like to say? Anything you'd like to send the listeners, or if anyone wants to get in touch with you? Yeah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so the best place to get me is firepodcast.ie. I've recorded 1 podcast episode a month, largely on our own fire journey, somewhat within an Irish context, but obviously it's huge, massive international audience as well, so completely relatable. And record the monthly updates. You can access all of them. There's so much, 100 episodes there to catch up on, and about 50 articles as well. So yeah, definitely, if you're more interested in hearing about how we did it, check out firepodcast.ie.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Well, keep up the great work you're doing. And let's hopefully keep in touch and bump into each other down the road as well.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you, Greg. It's been great. It's been great.
Cheers. Thanks, Michael.